Ladies and gentlemen, we're living in an age where we're making energy out of explosive, and we call that nuclear generation. In fact, we're also making actual bombs and explosives out of this nuclear energy, bombs that are able to destroy the world 3 times round. And today, the proposition would like to propose today's motion in saying because the world shouldn't have such a dangerous ability at our disposal, that the nuclear age must come to an end. But before I move on to propose the proposition's 3 substantive arguments, I would first like to define some of the motions in today's debate. By nuclear age, we would like to define as a period of using nuclear power. Therefore, when we say that the motion is we end the nuclear age, we're banning all forms of nuclear power, including nuclear weapons and nuclear generators. Having said that, the proposition today brings 3 arguments to today's debate. Number 1, the consequences and the dangers of using nuclear power is too big for us to continue using them. Number 2, nuclear power also heightens geopolitical tensions and therefore is detrimental to the world. And number 3, by using nuclear power, we're discouraging the world from developing further green technology, which will be actually a better alternative energy source for humanity. The first 2 points will be elaborated by me, the first speaker, and my deputy will come up to expand on this 3rd argument. Now let's directly move into the first argument of today's debate about the consequences and dangers of using nuclear power plants. Ladies and gentlemen, to this the proposition brings 3 points. Number 1, we have inherent dangers even in the current state of nuclear power plants when they function normally. Number 2, the risk of accidents for these nuclear power plants are too great for us to ignore. And number 3, the financial cost involved in this power plant is also significant. But now, let's move back to the first point of analysis about the current state of nuclear power generation. Ladies and gentlemen, people tend to think when that everything's well and that the nuclear power plant is just running under normal conditions, that we're all well off, that there isn't anything wrong with status quo. However, this is not true, and this is based on a misinformation, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, when nuclear power plants are actually being run, we are faced with significant amount of radioactive waste that come as a result of nuclear generations. And these kind of radioactive waste, ladies and gentlemen, we do not currently have means of disposing them safely. For example, let's take the example of the nuclear power plant in Fukushima in Japan. The radioactive waste that actually comes out of these power plants are just merely sealed in a metal barrels and sent to a disposal area where they're just buried for 50 years. However, do they disappear after 50 years? No. These kind of waste, because of the nature of nuclear elements, persist from 70 to 100 and 130 years. And when these kind of nuclear elements persist, they continuously tend to give out radioactivity, which affects the environment, which affects also the humans living around them. And these kind of radioactive carry out through the atmosphere and through wind and affect much wider areas than the areas that are just buried in there. So therefore, the radioactive waste is the number one problem that we cannot currently solve, and therefore makes nuclear power plants extremely dangerous. The second problem we have is the power plants themselves. These nuclear power plants have a due date when they should be stopped using and they should be disassembled. But the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is that because these power plants are already tainted with radioactivity, we do not have a safe means of disassembling them. Number 1, the people who go in to disassemble them will be exposed to radioactivity, which means sacrificing their health and even their lives. And number 2, we have nothing to do once these power plants are disassembled because we have 32 metric tons of concrete steel girders that we have nowhere to place because they are radioactive in themselves, because they have been imbued with radioactivity. The third problem the current nuclear power plant has is environmental issues. People tend to think that nuclear generators are more environmental friendly than coal or oil. This is not true. Number 1, because nuclear generators have to be cooled because of the heat it results from nuclear fission, we have to continuously use seawater to cool the plant down. This results in vast amount of hot water being released to the ocean, which disrupts the environment and which disrupts the class of fishes and other ocean organisms that live in there. But more importantly, we believe this is a problem because of just dumping nuclear reactors in the sea, which is the case in Russia. And during the Cold War, Russia made a vast fleet of nuclear-fueled submarines. But once the Cold War has ended, because they no longer have the capacity to maintain this kind of fleet, they have just put all these submarines inside the Bay of Kola and just left it rotting there. What does this mean, ladies and gentlemen? This means that we have 17 tons of nuclear submarine just rotting in the ocean, just waiting for the nuclear reactor to spill out to the ocean and contaminate the region. But finally, I would like to mention the problem of regional disadvantages. Because radioactivity is not completely solved in today's state, a lot of regions are against having nuclear power plants built in their hometown. Therefore, we also believe leads to regional conflicts. But moving on to the risk of accident, even though nuclear power plants have such significant risks when they're run perfectly enough, the risk escalates to a significant degree when we face risks of accidents, as has happened recently in Japan. Well, to this we would like to bring 4 points of analysis. Number 1, the positive feedback. This is how the nuclear reactor works. There's a single fission happens, and through that fission, a vast amount of energy and atom particles are distributed. And based on these energy and these particles, other fissions continuously come to happen. Meaning that if one fission happens, it leads to positive feedback, propagating its effect. Therefore, when we have a single accident, this leads to an unstoppable chain reaction that escalates by itself, as has happened in the Japan accident. The second point of analysis we would like to bring is perpetuity. When most accidents happen, it happens then, and we tend to think that it's over. But in the cases of nuclear reactors, because of radioactivity, the effects of the accidents tend to perpetuate for decades even after it has happened. This is a case of what happened in Chernobyl. Even though it has been over 30 years since Chernobyl incident has happened, the area is still contaminated by radioactive, and live organisms aren't able to live there. The third effect we have, from leading on from this, the third point of analysis we would like to bring is the ripple effect of radioactivity. Radioactivity doesn't just stop in that area. It is, as I've said before, carried through wind and atmosphere. It is also carried through living organisms and animals who have eaten things that are already contaminated by the radioactivity. Therefore, the effects tend to spread far beyond the area of accident, which makes the risk much more dangerous. Finally, I would like to mention, and now moving on to the financial cost. Because of the significant amount of cost we have to put in building these nuclear power plants, we believe that although nuclear power plant does make some energy, we believe the energy doesn't outweigh the cost that has already been gone into it. And because of the cost of the opportunity cost, we believe if these investments were used in other kinds of energy sources, we could have had a much more use of efficiency. Now let's quickly move on to the second argument of Proposition B, which is about that it heightens geopolitical tensions. Ladies and gentlemen, the argument is simple. If one nation has a nuke, the nations around it are going to become tense, and they're also going to want to have nuclear weapons themselves. We believe this is very problematic because nuclear weapons are dangerous weapons that are capable of destroying the world. And if one nation has it because everyone else is going to have it, the geopolitical tension is going to increase and propagate. But more than that, even if we don't have nuclear weapons and we just have nuclear power plants, the problem is that once we have nuclear power plants, it's just one very easy step to go from the plant to the nuclear bombs. So we believe even if a country just has a nuclear power plant, that will in itself heighten the tension because other countries will know that they are in full capacity and ability of possessing their nuclear weapon if they wish so. And therefore, we believe because it heightens geopolitical tension and because of all the dangerous consequences at the status quo, nuclear age must come to an end. Thank you.